First, I'd like to pay my respects to the traditional owners of the lands from which we're coming from, but also the topics about which we're going to talk about today, and pay my respect to elders past, present, and emerging. So this session of economics discussions is about how we're proposing to represent some First Nations interests when trying to come up with investment prioritisation programs in this economics plan application. So for a quick background for anyone who's missed previous sessions, so the economics platform, there's 4 key components to it. Economics plan, so this is a catchment level, the sub-catchment level investment portfolio creation or prioritisation tool. Economics project is about being able to capture farm scale specific projects, and then ultimately to be able to do impact reporting about the great work that's been done or the proposed investment programs, and then also to facilitate getting those projects into different economics marketplaces as well to seek external investment and support. But this round of activity is all about getting this economics plan part of the platform off the ground. So economics plan, it's a sub-catchment level lumped modelling approach, and it's really about rapid investment portfolio generation. The audience here are investors, and the users are those same investors, but also the organisations that largely coordinate large NRM activities like regional bodies, catchment management authorities, local government authorities, and we're going with a consistent approach across large spatial scales, which kind of limits us to data that works across large spatial scales. And we're basing this on previous work we've done for a reefonomics tool, so working in reef catchments. And we're dealing with both quantitative and qualitative measures in this economics plan application. So essentially what it does, we have collated and will continue to extend that collation of potential actions. We've got about 150 so far, and the actions represent either agricultural practice improvement or interventions such as revegetation, along with the associated support mechanism around that. So it's the action plus the grant or extension work that supports it. And collectively, you see a list down the bottom of how you might aggregate that 150 into agricultural and kind of traditional NRM works. But over on the right-hand side here is a screenshot out of the reefonomics application, and essentially this is in generating a potential portfolio, we identify which actions we want to consider, and then how sort of the types of things that we care about in coming up with that portfolio, and then how we might weight the relative importance of that in coming up with a prioritised investment portfolio. So essentially the end of what you get out of economics plan is an ordered list of potential actions, and then going from the best to the worst according to how you've set your priorities. And what it does with that list then, it predicts some outcomes. So what's novel here is that we're dealing not just with a single value issue, so it's not just water quality, so it's a combination of water quality, biodiversity, First Nations, social, economic, and climate change, and an interface to be able to explore that at different spatial scales and for the different values that you care about. We're representing the confidence around the predicted outcomes and the associated costs, or the cost estimates that we've come up with for those actions as well. And so again, this is for the investors. These are the things that matter to them about having confidence to invest. We represent a temporal response, so how quickly an action might take to have the effectiveness that we've predicted, and also representing the adoption potential. So almost all of these actions occur on land and require the engagement of landholders. So some things are adopted readily, others not so much. So essentially, the way the tool works, and similarly for the more locally specific economics project, we have actions, and those actions do work on the measures, the things, the individual elements that we care about, and then we'll typically lump those measures up for reporting purposes to high level value. So what differs between the lumped and the detailed components here is the way that we represent the effectiveness of the action on the measure. So we're shooting for simple approaches in the economics plan approach. So to make that a bit less abstract, if we think about an action of cultural burning program, we've got a whole series of measures that we've identified through this series of workshops. So the things that our actions impact upon, and then we have a representation of how that might be lumped up, mostly from a high level reporting view of the key values that we care about, but also be able to drill down into individual elements. So what we've got represented here in the dark are all the things that we're pretty comfortable about being able to represent in a quantitative way. The things in the grey, not so much. So we're going for a qualitative approach here. And then what we wanted to focus on today was these two elements dealing with trying to represent the potential value of an action within the context of First Nations people. So there are obviously going to be other elements. These other measures also matter to First Nations, but these ones are specifically directed to First Nations. So we've got two measures represented here. So on-country value and engagement in the specific action. Now, the way that we intend to represent this is the same across all of those light grey areas. So we're using a Likert scale approach. So a Likert scale is a and you'll be sort of familiar with it in terms of when you do surveys, you have a range from really bad to really good, and in this case we want to use a 7-point scale. And then we've covered this in a previous workshop about how that works computationally in terms of how we represent that and model it, or transform that through to come up with a kind of aggregate score. But the point of today's discussion really is about whether we've got the right topics represented here. So the first one here is about First Nations engagement in the project, and so from the neutral end, so we're going initially to whether there's engagement, whether there's either delivery or lead of the action or the project, if you like, and then delivery and lead is the extreme end here. So for example, if an example of engaged might be, we have a revegetation program. There's consultation with local nations about where the best place to do that is. The next level here, delivery and lead, might be to let that nation lead the project, or have that group lead the project, or deliver the project. So be actively involved in the planting and where it happens. And then the extreme end, so run the whole project. It's that local nation's specific project and focused around their specific needs and implementation. The second area here is whether, and so ideally you'd think none of these actions should have any downsides, right? At worst they should be neutral. But because of, and this is from a previous discussion, we're representing a business as usual functionality in this tool. So, and the purpose of the business as usual is that if we actually do nothing, things continue to get worse, in so much as trees continue to be cleared. And we represent this in our business as usual case, actions that are detrimental. So this is why we need to be able to represent the downside here as well. So, in the case of do nothing, and if there's continued clearing, there's actually downsides going on. And so let's go on to the second point here. So the action provides on-country value. So this is about, neutral might be it's a agricultural management practice, doesn't specifically provide any on-country value, but there might be indirect on-country value. We're doing some preservation of some existing riparian areas for biodiversity purposes, but indirectly there might be on-country value that might co-locate with songlines, for example. Direct on-country value, and then the highest level here is about the primary design focus of this project is about addressing on-country value and providing on-country value. Okay, I think I've covered that. So where we are in this collective series of presentations is we've got a final roundup on Friday. So I'll try and put together all the key outcomes from the post-presentation discussions that have come up through this session. So I'll post this video along with all the others at economics.net.au and the videos page. Thank you.